Hello and welcome to Everyday Tarot, your daily dive into the divine wisdom of the tarot. I'm your host, Camille A. Saunders, healer, tarot enthusiast, and your local witch next door, and today I'm talking about the Five of Cups. Whether you're a seasoned tarot reader or just starting to explore, this podcast offers daily insights, intuitive messages, and practical advice drawn from the cards. Each episode is designed to help you connect with your inner wisdom, find clarity in your decisions, and tap into the energy of the universe. Tune in every day, Monday through Friday, for fresh perspectives and empowering guidance from the tarot as interpreted by me. If you love the show, the best way to support it is by listening daily, leaving a review, and subscribing or following in your favorite podcast app. For monthly hangouts, tarot Q&As, individual readings, and more, join the Everyday Tarot Patreon family. If you're local to the greater Puget Sound area, you can check out the Let's Talk Tarot meetup group for the latest event postings of where we're meeting up next. If you're not local to my area, you can join me for a virtual tarot card creation event on Friday, June 20th at 5 p.m. Pacific Daylight Time. I'll give you a list of recommended supplies, we'll meet online, and I'll walk you through the process of creating your own cards. Get the date on your calendar now and look out for the sign-up page coming soon. If you're interested in my free PDF with the 2025 5-card tarot spread that I created just for you at the beginning of this year, you can get that by joining my newsletter list. My weekly newsletter always has the most up-to-date information on upcoming events, presentations, musings, and more. And if you don't already know, I'm a sex and relationships therapist seeing clients virtually all over Washington State. I love working with queer, poly, and witchy clients. If you'd like to work with a therapist that doesn't judge you, is a little bit witchy just like you, and helps you learn how to deal with anxiety, chronic pain or illness, communication issues, self-advocacy, and sex, head to my website and book a free consultation now. You can find the links for any of these offers in the show notes or on my website, CamilleASaunders.com/everydaytarot, in addition to the images of the cards I pull. All right, so we are into season 9 now, where I'm talking all about the Suit of Cups, going through each card, one per episode. If you haven't listened to my other seasons yet, you can check those out. A couple of the ones I've done are season 1 was all about tarot basics. Seasons 2 and 3, I went through all the major arcana cards and an overview of the 4 suits. Season 4 was all about tarot and pop culture. Season 5 was about 13 common tarot spreads, and season 6, 7, and 8 were about the Suit of Wands, Pentacles, and Swords. Right now we're into season 9, so I'm wrapping up my seasons where I go through each of the suits, and we're talking about the Suit of Cups. If you want to hear an episode dedicated to the overview of the Suit of Cups, you can check out episode 38, but today we're talking just about the Five of Cups. So if you have a tarot deck nearby or accessible, go ahead, take it out and flip through and find your Five of Cups card. So common images or symbols with the card, or sort of grief, loss, regret, heartbreak, misfortune, and mistakes. We often see some of the cups are overturned or broken. Sometimes things are spilling out of them, but often 3 are sort of overturned and 2 are upright. And that's often how they're depicted. So I'm looking at 3 of my decks right now and how they depict it. In the Goddess of Love Tarot deck by Gabriella Herstick and illustrated by Julia Popescu, we see an anatomical heart depicted in the middle of the card. We see a sword stabbed through it, which is rare for the cups sign, right? Because we don't generally have sort of some of the other suits objects showing up in the card. At least it's not super often. This is sort of indicating perhaps that heartbreak. We have 4 cups. They're all sort of upright. They look a little unsteady, perhaps. They're sort of floating around the heart in this sort of spiral, actually. So in the back of the furthest image back, this is a collage style card, we see the satellite image of a hurricane, where you see the really big spiral of clouds and rain and everything. And water, and it's almost like the cups are being kind of sucked into that, like they're in this sort of formation as well. And then we also see pink roses and pearls. So there's lots of Venusian energy, Venus energy of the roses and pearls, and right, sort of the opulence. But then we also have this heartbreak depicted here, and 5 cards. And all the suits are sort of often this challenging, aspect, or grief, or contemplation, or sort of beating yourself up, or they're often in this like sort of like conflict realm. They are sort of the halfway point. Usually, if we think of the ace through 10 as like a minor version or a microcosm of the hero's journey, like we see in the major arcana, where you go from the fool to the end of the world. In the different suits, we see that from ace to 10. So again, if we think of that, fives are in the middle, right? If you think of like when you're kind of in the middle of a book or when you're getting towards like the end, like we start to get into this like, oh, what is the climax? What is the conflict that's coming up right now in the book? And that, I feel like that's sort of how these cards depict it. I was going to see if there was any additional information in the deck guidebook for this one. Yeah, it says one of the paradoxes of existence is that to feel the depths of love, you must be willing to face the depths of heartache and pain. The Five of Cups, the energy of loss, hangs heavy and heartbreak seems imminent. This is a time of nostalgia, longing for what's been, thinking of the pain over and over, digging the knife into the wound, right? We see that sword into the heart in the card. It says it's imperative to recognize the pain you're leaving behind, but you shouldn't sink into the emotional masochism or excuse distressing behaviors. Instead, open your eyes to the way you're causing yourself to suffer. Um, so there is this sort of like tension in the card, right? Of like, yes, things have been challenging or have weighed heavy on you, and right, like what is actually coming next? Like, what are the ways you're contributing to your own suffering? And the astrological correspondence is Mars and Scorpio, and we'll talk a little bit more about that in the Tarot and Astrology book. And the next card I'm looking at is the Desert Illuminations card. This has sort of, I think, a bit of the traditional depiction. We see a person in the middle of the card, and we see these three, or yeah, they're jugs instead of cups in this deck, but three of the jugs are overturned and stuff spilling out, and two of them are upright. We see sort of like a bandit style person, like their face is partially covered. They have also like a dagger or a sword at their side. Yeah, let's see. And then we see them kind of in the desert with this like high moon or sun like depicted. It says a masked bandit in a long black cape stands under the night sky in the middle of a painted desert. They are surrounded by a bunch of whiskey jugs tipped over and spilling their contents onto the sand. This is an ominous scene that is surreal and mysterious. This five of jugs is symbolic of lost opportunities and disappointments. In life, sometimes plans fall through or situations don't turn out exactly as you expect. Instead of dwelling on the lost moments, consider how you can learn from these experiences. You may run the risk of getting stuck in the past. Remember to stay present and focus from moment to moment, one day at a time. Practice forgiveness and patience with yourself. It is the key to getting unstuck. So again, that's sort of like how are we contributing to our own suffering, but also, right, like recognizing where we've been and that we're moving into a different path in the future. And lastly, in the Therapist Who Tarot deck depiction of this card, prompts by Drea Bloom and images by Rebecca Bloom here. And I guess the other card in the middle I talked about was the Desert Illuminations Tarot deck by Lindsay D. Williams. So in this Therapist Who Tarot one, we have sort of an abstract depiction of a person. We just sort of see like their body and head. We see these five cups around them, but again, some of them look spilled or overturned or like they're overflowing. And there's all these blue and yellow and then sort of a mix of purple colors. Like it gives like kind of like chaos, or almost like if you were like if you had written, you know, in like a movie whenever they're like writing in their journal and they're like crying in it and the ink is like smearing. That's like almost how this card looks to me. Like it's like being smeared. It is watercolor, so it does sort of bleed like that. But um, so anyway, on this deck, there is no tarot deck guidebook, but there is a word associated with the card that's printed on the front of the card. It says regrets. And then on the back of the card, we have these prompts. It says, what would you rather not know? What are you pushing away? And what are you afraid of? So again, it really gives that like Scorpio vibes where we have, again, sort of like the wateriness of the like emotion aspect of it, right? We're in a cup suit, so that's also this like watery emotionness. And then we have sort of like the sting, right? If you think of like a scorpion, you have like the sting that happens, right? The heartbreak, the loss, the grief. And then we also have this like, how do we transmute what we've learned? How do we move on? How do we like think about it in this way and kind of learn from our mistakes, make different choices in the future, etc. So in the Library of Esoterica, tarot book by Taschen, they talk about that the Five of Cups is a point of no return, separation, and grief. The Five of Cups symbolizes a change in needs and priorities and suggests that we abandon regret and instead see our losses as gains. Okay. So yeah, instead of kind of, right, looking backward and thinking, oh, I should have done things differently or this or that, it's like, oh, okay, well, in order for me to do things differently in the future, right, I had to kind of learn that lesson. Like that's, I feel like, what we're being offered here. In the Tarot and Astrology book by Karine Kenner, they talk about, again, the Five of Cups associated with Mars and Scorpio. It says, it's no coincidence that Halloween falls during the first decan of Scorpio. On Halloween, the veil between the worlds is said to be at its thinnest. The souls of the dead can slip effortlessly back and forth from the other side to Earth. Scorpio is well acquainted with the dark mysteries of life. To most people, those mysteries seem melancholic. The young woman in the card, however, seems to have come to terms with them. It says the young woman in the card is already familiar with death, the major arcana card that corresponds to Scorpio. Because the woman in the card is young, part of the minor arcana, and positioned in the first decan of the sign, she might not have firsthand experience with death, but even so, there's this understanding here that seems natural and innate. Her familiarity is strengthened by the fact that the first decan of Scorpio is ruled by Mars, which is the warrior planet, and by the fact that Mars is also the natural ruler of the entire sign of Scorpio. So there is this sort of like symbiosis going on here. Every warrior and every surgeon who fall under Mars's towering shadow knows that death is a natural consequence of life. Sometimes it's even brought about by our insistence that the life we want is worth preserving and fighting for. Like the young woman's cloak, our bodies are easily shed, cast off, and thrown aside. Compare the Five of Cups to the Death card, its counterpart in the Major Arcana, and you'll notice that both cards depict the process of loss, transformation, and change. So again, it is this sort of like turning point card. In the Fearless Tarot book by Elliot Adam, they talk about the Five of Cups is this trance of negative thinking. It says the Five of Cups symbolizes the trance-like state of focusing only on the negative, even when all is not lost. Again, often what's depicted is the figure on the card gloomily stares at the three spilled or overturned cups, failing to notice the two perfectly upright cups on the other right side of the card. It says between the two standing cups is a bridge. I'm looking at my other cards to see here what I see. The bridge symbolizes that the way over your obstacle will be made clear when you focus on what is working and what is positive in your life. So if you listen to last episode in the Four of Cups, right, that was also a part of this, of like recognizing the good things you have, right, having gratitude for what you do have and not always just focusing on the negative. This one's saying, right, that like working and focusing on what's positive, right, the card also reveals that just because everything in your life isn't perfect, that doesn't mean you need to feel bad about it. It says all day, month, year, or decade. Does your mind ever feel hypnotized with problems? Is it difficult to see all the blessings you currently have because you can't stop focusing on your losses? And does ruminating rob you of countless hours in the day? If you've ever experienced this, you know it seems very difficult to snap out of. It often occurs when the mind is idle. It says if you're traditionally a problem solver, it can be difficult to be at peace when there is no task to do. The mind immediately shuffles through its memory banks to dredge up something that you should have anxiety about. Then the mind says, here's a doozy, remember this horrible time? What if it happens again? Then the trance begins, and soon 20 minutes have gone by, leaving you feeling hopeless about yourself and your prospects. Look at the image of the spilled cups. It appears they contain wine. However, there is another spill pictured in the foreground of pure water. I'm looking at my cards again to Let's see here. Let's see. This is a symbol for the emotional disappointment that may have occurred in the past, but is having real-world implications or setbacks in the present. If the expectation is that something will fail, the likelihood of its failure exponentially becomes more likely. The Five of Cups encapsulates the effect of our emotional state on our future opportunities and prospects. When this card appears, it's time to snap out of the negative emotional rumination. Yeah, so sort of this like aspect of, right, it's not actually helping us to dwell on things from the past, right? We can recognize things that happen and again learn from them, but if we're just kind of sitting in that place, um, it's very hard sometimes to break from that. In the Tarot for Change book by Jessica Dorr, they talk about the folk interpretations of this card point out that the person depicted in the card so concerned, with the three spilled cups, they've neglected the two still standing. It says it can certainly be read as a metaphor for the power of perspective and the difference of it can have on how we experience and move forward from a situation. The point is often made that if they just turn around, the person in the card would see opportunity rather than loss. It says, but I think we miss out on something crucial if you don't first learn to look squarely at the cups that have spilled. Sure, if we look too long, we might turn to stone or get stuck in self-pity, self-criticism, or despair. But maybe the trick is to recognize that we actually have the capacity to both look at and learn from. We can feel the full impacts of a situation, and then we can let the material and emotional consequences teach us. Having felt the full weight of a painful thing, we can turn on our heel and move forward with an equal level of fullness, maybe even toward a gift. Feeling the repercussions of our behaviors initiates us into the space where we can learn to do better. Shame can make it difficult to do this. People who struggle with compulsive behavior often experience intense shame after doing a habitual thing they swore that they would stop doing. The intensity of the shame around the forbidden behavior stimulates an avoidance response that makes the person unable to look directly at or feel into a misstep and its aftermath. Shame is an experience of not only having done something bad, but feeling like you actually are bad. It's often rooted in old, early learning. But shame really restricts our ability to turn around and look at what's happened from the perspective that every mistake is an opportunity to learn. If we can't look straight down the barrel of our mistakes at the feelings and bodily sensations and thoughts that have come up in the wake, we rob ourselves of a precious opportunity to gain a depth of understanding around why, on a felt level, the behavior is no good for us. Looking at a behavior that we feel ashamed about gives us room to explore what led to the behavior, what might have triggered it, and what was happening internally and externally at the time. If the behavior was in response to a difficult emotion, this will also give us the option to identify some other coping skills to use next time instead, rather than continue to do the same old thing we hate doing, and start to build new skills for managing our emotions and tolerating distress. If we can't look because we're caught in shame-driven avoidance, we can't learn. And I think this is a lot of time what I spend doing with clients in therapy, which is that, it's a safe place where I can be there and we can talk about some of these hard things, choices people have made, or, facing emotions, talking about new coping skills, instead of maybe the ones you've used before, and just having someone there to help guide you and hold you through the process of, looking at some of these parts of yourself that maybe you don't like or behaviors that you do, instead of just not thinking about them, and then feeling bad about them and never wanting to do them again. Because, what she's saying is that when we're led from this place of shame, we just sort of ignore and avoid the thing, and we don't actually then get to kind of learn from it. And so she's really talking about, that feeling ashamed is different because it can be oh, I don't want to do that thing again, It's not that I'm a bad person. I can understand why I made the choices that I did, or I did the behavior, or I said the thing to someone. I can see why I did that. I see this sort of making sense, and that doesn't mean I want to continue to do it in the future. Again, a lot of us have, right, trauma or like triggers from things from our past, from childhood, from different types of trauma, and it can be helpful to understand why, again, we make the choices we make. And then for the future, think about, okay, I can recognize that that is my common response or sort of what I chose to do in the past or what protected me, right, in the past. And like, I want to let that go, or right, I don't want to make those same choices in the future. And so learning new coping skills, right, and instead of continuing to do the same thing that you hate doing or feel shameful about, we start building new skills, right? Identifying, naming our emotions, being able to feel them, being able to tolerate, seeing other people's disappointment or distress or their emotions, right? Other people feeling emotions. And then if we can actually like look at that, right, then we can learn from it. And she's sort of saying, right, how do we, right, change that shame-driven avoidance into something that we can actually learn from, and that's kind of what this card is all about, right? Maybe this tendency to look at only the 3 cups that are falling over and not the upright ones. Well, she's saying, right, there is something perhaps beneficial about actually, right, looking at all the mistakes, all the overturned cups, seeing why it happened. Like, did you turn around really quickly and they all fell over, or you whipped them with your cape, or whatever it was, and kind of why we made those decisions. And then, right, maybe it will be more easy to, or you might be able to recognize, like, oh, actually, I have these other things in my life, right? These 2 other jugs or cups. And right, those are really fulfilling, and I'm really happy about those. So now I can turn a bit more towards those and choose those coping skills, fill those cups, right, instead of just trying to ignore the 3 that have overturned. All right, so let's dive in and see what the cards have to say today on this topic, right? How do we do that? How do we, right, other than perhaps in therapy, how do we think about these, right, challenging experiences we've had in the past or choices that we've made, and lovingly and gently like examine what we did, and right, maybe have some regret about, and like make different choices in the future, right? It's not usually helpful to just berate ourselves or tell ourselves that that was terrible, just don't do it again, right? I think we all kind of know, or I guess maybe have learned by this point that that doesn't really work. Right? This is sort of, I think, also the idea of like punitive measures for things, right? If you just have punishment, yeah, you might learn that if you do that thing, you get punished, and sometimes that can be a reason enough not to do it. But a lot of times, people just get used to the punishment, and then maybe, right, take that on as like, oh, this is just, I deserve this. This is how I am because I'm so bad, right? That's the idea of shame. So how do we, right, view our past mistakes or things we've done, choices we've made, with this sort of critical lens, but be able to take a heart-driven, right, a loving um, sort of response to it, or look at it and see why we made those decisions, and then, right, hopefully, again, look at those 2 cups that are still standing, and right, work towards those, work on filling those, and kind of focusing on the things that we do have, or the things that are working really well, that we are good at, and then that can make it easier um, to to hold that, right, criticism or feedback from other people about what we might not be doing the best at. Okay, I pulled the brawler in reverse. So the brawler is what it sounds like. It has like 2 hands that are like wrapped in, gauze or whatever, like as if you were boxing someone. It says lack of empathy and confrontation. So I'm imagining this is going to be about, right, not doing that. Let's see. Brawler. in reverse. A conflict is causing tension in your life, but rather than letting it run its course, you've been bottling it up to try and avoid a confrontation. This will only lead to a breakdown in trust. Find the healthy balance between expressing your needs clearly and keeping the peace. What seems like an incoming argument may turn out to be nothing once you've cleared the air. So yeah, again, this is kind of that idea of like being able to look at, right, and actually like hold that potential for confrontation or right this thing that maybe you did that you're not proud of, and being able to express your needs, right, keeping the peace and not turning this into like an argument or a thing that because you feel bad about it, you maybe want other people to feel bad too or point out their mistakes so that they're on a level playing field, right? It's kind of saying that don't let that potential like ruin what's going on in your life right now. Let it run its course, right? Allow yourself to feel the emotions, and process and move through them, and don't just bottle them up because usually that just means that eventually they will explode. All right, so links for the tarot decks I talk about will always be in the show notes and on my website if you'd like to look at them or purchase them. And thanks for joining me today on Everyday Tarot. Just as a reminder, the podcast comes out daily, Monday to Friday for all of 2025. You can email me, me@CamilleASaunders.com with your thoughts, questions, and more. I would love to hear from you if you have any ideas for future seasons or any questions about certain cards or processes, cards you find really challenging or ones you don't understand or anything else. So yeah, I hope to hear from you and see you soon. Bye-bye.